The snow was falling heavily on the evening of December 15th, turning the city park into a winter wonderland that most people were too cold to appreciate. Most people hurried past, heads down against the wind, eager to get home to warm houses and hot dinners. But not everyone had somewhere warm to go. Maxwell Sterling sat in the back of his town car, reviewing contracts on his tablet as his driver navigated the snowy streets. At 36, Maxwell was the founder and CEO of Sterling Tech, a software company that had made him a billionaire before his 35th birthday. He was on his way to a charity gala at the Grandview Hotel, one of those obligatory events where wealthy people gathered to write checks and feel good about themselves. "Sir, there's quite a bit of traffic ahead," his driver, James, said. "We might be a few minutes late." "That's fine. Take the park route if it's faster." As they turned onto the road that bordered Riverside Park, something caught Maxwell's eye. A figure sitting on a bench beneath one of the park's old street lamps. In this weather at this hour, it was unusual enough to make him look twice. It was a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, sitting in a wheelchair. She wore a gray wool coat that looked warm enough but had seen better days. Her blonde hair was dusted with snowflakes, but what made Maxwell tell James to stop the car was what the young woman held in her gloved hands. A small cake with a single lit candle, the flame dancing in the wind. Beside her on the bench sat a little girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, wearing a pink coat that looked slightly too small. The child was watching the candle with wide eyes. Maxwell didn't think. He just acted. "James, pull over." "Sir?" "Pull over." "I'll just be a moment." Maxwell stepped out of the car into the cold, snowflakes immediately catching in his dark hair and on his expensive black coat. He approached the bench slowly, not wanting to startle them. As he got closer, he could hear the young woman singing softly, "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you." The little girl joined in, her voice sweet and clear in the winter air. "Happy birthday to Mommy, happy birthday to you." They finished the song, and the young woman closed her eyes, made a wish, and blew out the candle. The little girl clapped, her mittened hands making soft thumping sounds. "That was beautiful," Maxwell said gently. Both of them jumped, startled. The young woman's hand went protectively to the child, pulling her closer. "I'm sorry. We didn't mean to be in anyone's way." "We'll move." "No, please. I didn't mean to interrupt. I saw you from the car and I wanted to—" Maxwell trailed off, not sure what he wanted to say. "Is it your birthday?" The young woman's cheeks flushed, though whether from cold or embarrassment, Maxwell couldn't tell. "Yes, I'm sorry, this must look strange." "Not strange, just—" Maxwell gestured to the park around them. "Why are you celebrating out here in the snow?" The young woman looked down at the cake in her hands. It was small, clearly from a grocery store bakery, probably the cheapest one available. "This is where we live." "In the park, I mean. We've been homeless for about 3 months now. My daughter Sophie, she insisted we celebrate my birthday. She saved up her allowance." "My allowance from picking up cans?" Sophie said proudly. She couldn't have been more than 6. "I got Mommy a cake from the store. Mr. Henderson at the bakery gave, me a discount because it's someone's birthday." Maxwell felt something crack in his chest. A child collecting cans to buy her mother a birthday cake. A mother celebrating in a freezing park because she had nowhere else to go. "What's your name?" Maxwell asked, sitting down on the bench beside them, not caring about his expensive suit or the snow. "I'm Emily. This is my daughter, Sophie." "I'm Maxwell. It's nice to meet you both. Emily, if you don't mind my asking, how did you end up here?" Emily looked at him carefully, as if deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she spoke. "I was in a car accident 2 years ago. It left me paralyzed from the waist down. I was working as a nurse, but I couldn't continue after the accident. I had some savings, and I received a small settlement, but medical bills and therapy ate through it quickly. My husband couldn't handle the situation and left. We managed for a while in a small apartment, but I couldn't keep up with rent while caring for Sophie and managing my disability. We've been on a waiting list for accessible housing, but it takes time. So for now, we're here." She said it all matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but Maxwell could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of trying to keep her daughter safe and cared for under impossible circumstances. "Mommy tries really hard," Sophie said earnestly. "She's the best mommy. Even though we live outside, she makes sure I go to school every day. And she reads me stories. And she teaches me things. I'm sure she does, Maxwell said softly. He looked at the cake still sitting in Emily's lap. Have you eaten any of it yet? We were about to, Emily said. Would you mind if I joined you? I was on my way to a very boring party where I'd have to eat fancy food. I don't really like and make small talk with people I don't really know. I'd much rather share birthday cake with you if you'll let me. Emily looked suspicious. Why would you want to do that? Because, Maxwell said honestly, I've been going to these charity events for years, writing checks and feeling like I'm making a difference. But I've forgotten what it means to actually see people, to talk to them, to share a moment that matters. You and Sophie just reminded me. Emily studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but only if you have some cake. I insist. Maxwell smiled. Deal. Emily cut the small cake into 3 pieces, using a plastic knife from the bakery bag. The pieces were tiny, but they were shared with such care that Maxwell felt like he was part of something sacred. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the snow fall around them. This is the best birthday cake I've ever had, Maxwell said, and he meant it. Liar, Emily said, but she was smiling. I'm sure you've had much better cakes than this grocery store special. I've had expensive cakes, but this one matters. That makes it better. Sophie looked at him with her big eyes. Are you rich? Sophie, Emily said. That's not polite. It's okay, Maxwell said. Yes, Sophie, I am. I have a lot of money. Then why aren't you at home in your warm house? Sophie asked with childlike directness. Because right now this is where I want to be. They talked for over an hour. Emily told him about her life before the accident, her love of nursing, her dreams of becoming a nurse practitioner. Sophie told him about school and her favorite, books, and how she wanted to be a doctor when she grew up, so she could help people like her mommy. Maxwell told them about his company, about the software they developed, about how he'd started in his college dorm room. But more than that, he found himself talking about his own life, his loneliness despite his wealth, his sense that he'd lost touch with what really mattered in the pursuit of success. Finally, Maxwell's phone buzzed. A text from James asking if everything was okay. Maxwell realized he'd been sitting on a snowy bench for over an hour and had completely missed the charity gala. I have to go, Maxwell said, standing up. But before I do, I need to ask you something. Would you let me help you? Emily's face shuddered. We're not asking for charity. I know you're not. But I'm offering help anyway. Not because you're asking, but because I want to. Because I can. And because it's your birthday, and nobody should spend their birthday homeless. What kind of help? Let me get you into a hotel tonight. Both of you. Somewhere warm and safe. And then tomorrow, let me make some calls. I have connections with accessible housing programs. I can help move you up the waiting list. I can help you get back on your feet. Why would you do this for strangers? Maxwell looked at Sophie, who'd fallen asleep against her mother's side, exhausted from the cold and the excitement. Because Sophie collected cans to buy you a birthday cake. Because you're celebrating in a park in the snow and still finding reasons to smile. Because you remind me what courage looks like. And because I have the means to help, and it would be wrong not to use them. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Let me help, please. And so Emily said yes. Maxwell set them up in a suite at the Grandview Hotel that night, the same hotel where the charity gala had been held. He ordered room service for them, made sure they had everything they needed, and gave Emily his card with his personal cell number. Call me tomorrow, he said. We'll start figuring out a long-term solution. The next day, Maxwell made calls. He spoke with the director of accessible housing in the city, a woman he'd donated to before but had never actually met. He explained Emily's situation and asked what could be done to expedite her case. Within a week, Emily and Sophie had an accessible apartment in a safe neighborhood. Maxwell covered the first year's rent and set up a trust fund for Sophie's education. He connected Emily with a job placement service that specialized in helping people with disabilities find work. And within a month, she was working remotely as a medical consultant for a healthcare company. But more than the financial help, Maxwell stayed involved in their lives. He visited regularly, checking in on how they were adjusting. He became something like a friend, then something like family. 6 months after that snowy night in the park, Maxwell was having dinner with Emily and Sophie in their apartment. Sophie was showing him her latest school project, a poster about community helpers. "I put you on here," Sophie said, pointing to a stick figure she'd drawn. "Under the category of people who help others." Maxwell felt his throat tighten. "I'm honored. But Sophie, your mom is the real hero. She kept you safe and loved even when things were really hard." "I know," Sophie said seriously. "Mommy's my first hero. You're my second hero. Is that okay?" "That's more than okay." After Sophie went to bed, Maxwell and Emily sat in the living room with coffee. "You changed our lives," Emily said quietly. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have. You and Sophie reminded me what matters. Before I met you, I was successful but empty. I went through the motions of living but didn't really feel alive. You taught me that real wealth isn't about money. It's about connection, compassion, making a difference in someone's life in a meaningful way. We didn't teach you that. You already knew it. You just needed to be reminded. Maybe, but I'm glad you were the ones to remind me." Emily smiled. "So am I. And Maxwell? I know we've talked about this before, but I want to say it again. We're paying you back. Someday, when Sophie and I are on our feet, we're going to help someone else the way you helped us. We're going to pass it forward. I know you will. That's what makes this meaningful." Years later, Emily did exactly that. She became a nurse practitioner, specializing in working with patients who had disabilities. She used her own experience to connect with and help others who were struggling. Sophie grew up to become a doctor, just as she'd said she would, and she dedicated her career to helping underserved communities. And Maxwell changed too. He started a foundation that focused on helping families experiencing homelessness, particularly those dealing with disability or medical crises. He didn't just write checks anymore, he got involved personally, meeting the people his foundation helped, learning their stories, seeing them as humans rather than statistics. Every year on December 15th, Maxwell, Emily, and Sophie would meet in the park, where they'd first met, the place where Emily had celebrated her birthday in the snow. They'd bring a cake, light a candle, and make wishes together. Sophie, now in medical school, would tell the story to her classmates sometimes, about how her mother had been homeless, how she'd collected cans to buy a birthday cake, how a stranger had stopped his car on a snowy night and changed everything. What made him stop? People would ask. What made him care? Sophie would smile and say, "I think he was looking for something real, something that mattered. And when he saw my mom celebrating her birthday in the snow, never giving up even when things were impossible, he found it. He found what he'd been missing. And we found exactly who we needed when we needed him most," Emily would add. "We saved each other that night. He gave us shelter and stability and help when we needed it most. But we gave him something too. We gave him purpose. We reminded him why his wealth mattered, not for what it could buy for himself, but for what it could do for others." People would often ask Maxwell the same question. "What made you stop that night?" Most people would have driven past. Maxwell would think back to that moment, seeing a woman in a wheelchair holding a small cake with a single candle, a little girl singing happy birthday in the snow. He'd think about the choice he'd made to stop, to get out of the car, to sit down on that bench instead of going to a fancy party. "I don't know exactly," he'd say. Something about that image, the courage it took to celebrate, in the midst of hardship, the love between a mother and daughter that nothing could diminish. It stopped me in my tracks. It made me realize I'd been driving past moments like that for years, too busy with my own life to see the people around me. That night I chose to stop, and it changed everything. The story of the birthday in the snow became something of a legend in their city. Local news covered it, and Maxwell's Foundation used it as an example of what one moment of compassion could accomplish. But for Maxwell, Emily, and Sophie, it wasn't a feel-good story or a publicity opportunity. It was simply the night their lives intersected in exactly the right way at exactly the right time. It was the night a billionaire learned that wealth means nothing if you don't use it to help others. The night a homeless mother learned that asking for help isn't weakness but courage. The night a little girl learned that kindness exists in the world, even in the darkest moments. And it all started with a small cake, a single candle, and a birthday wish made in the snow. Sometimes the most important moments in life aren't the ones we plan. They're the ones where we choose to stop, to see, to care, to act. They're the moments when we remember that we're all connected, that we all matter, that we all deserve dignity and compassion. That snowy December night, 3 people found what they'd been missing. And in finding each other, they all found their way home.